When I called my son on video to ask about his wedding plans, my daughter-in-law, Fernanda, looked at me with a cold smile and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited the people who really matter." Those words fell on me like a block of ice down my spine. But before I go on, remember to subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. We always love to see how far our stories travel. My name is Carol. I'm 68 years old, and I learned the bitter way that when love and money get mixed together, they can poison even the deepest family bond. For 35 years, I raised my son Mark alone after losing my husband in a car accident when our boy was only 8. I pinched every penny, worked 2 jobs, and let go of countless dreams just so Mark could have a decent education and a stable start in life. He was always a sensitive and intelligent child. I still remember him at 10, sitting at the kitchen table working on math homework, then looking up to ask if one day we could go to the beach. I promised him we would, even though I knew that money had to go toward his school books. His grades were excellent, and when he was accepted into college, I cried with pride. Every sacrifice felt worth it. During his sophomore year, he met Fernanda. She was pretty, outgoing, and came from a well-off family, or at least, that's what she never missed a chance to mention. From the start, I noticed the spark in her eyes whenever she talked about international trips or designer clothes. I brushed aside my unease because my son was happy. Their relationship moved quickly, and soon they were planning to move in together. That was when the first emergencies started. The apartment they wanted required a deposit they didn't have. "Just this once, Mom," Mark reassured me when he asked for $3,000. I pulled it from my retirement savings, the money I had built up over decades as a nurse. A week after they moved in, the refrigerator broke. Another $2,500 from my savings. The next month, Fernanda lost her job, and they needed help with rent. "Just until she finds something new," Mark explained. And so it began a cycle that lasted 4 years, a pattern of emergencies that always ended with money flowing out of my account and into their pockets. During that time, I started noticing changes in my son. His visits became rare and usually lined up with a new financial need. The daily calls turned into weekly, then bi-weekly, and they always ended with another request. "Mom, the car broke down. Mom, we need to replace the sofa. Mom, the credit card is maxed out." Meanwhile, on social media, the only reason I had learned to use it was to keep up with his life. I saw photo after photo of them dining at fancy restaurants, buying new clothes, taking weekend trips. Each photo cut me like a knife, but I kept telling myself that young people have different priorities. Maybe they'd caught a sale or gotten gifts from friends. My neighbor Cecilia, also a widow, was the first to warn me. "Carol, don't you think it's strange your son only shows up when he needs money?" I defended Mark right away. "He's building his life, Cecilia. Everybody needs help at the beginning." She just shook her head, but the seed of doubt was planted. Gradually, my whole life revolved around their needs. I canceled doctor's appointments so I could wire money for vague emergencies. I stopped buying my arthritis medication so I could cover the payment on their new car. I cut back on food, even saving on bread, so they could balance their expenses after months of overspending. And I did it all with a smile, convinced it was my duty as a mother. On sleepless nights when my joints ached without the medicine, I comforted myself thinking of Mark's smile, picturing the comfortable life I was helping him build. My once tidy home began to fall apart. The kitchen ceiling leaked, and I couldn't afford repairs. Only 2 burners still worked on my stove. My washing machine had been broken for months, forcing me to wash clothes by hand, even though arthritis made every motion painful. Last spring, Mark called to tell me he and Fernanda were engaged. My heart swelled with joy, and for a moment I forgot every hardship. My boy was getting married. Immediately, I started planning how I could help, maybe sell some jewelry my mother had left me, bake treats for the reception, or cut down on my own expenses to save for the banquet. The next day, Fernanda called. "Carol, we're thinking of something intimate, maybe out in the country. I found the perfect dress, but it's a little over our budget." Before she finished, I knew where this was going. "How much, dear?" I asked, already calculating how much I'd have left after another withdrawal. "4,000, she said casually, as if naming the price of a cup of coffee. I swallowed hard. That was more than 2 months of my pension, but it was my only son's wedding. "I'll see what I can do," I replied, knowing I'd do whatever it took to make him happy on that special day. The months that followed revolved around the wedding. Every call brought a new expense: the wedding dress, the rings, the banquet, the flowers, all needed my financial contribution. By then I had sold my car, some family jewelry, and was even considering a bank loan, knowing it would leave me paying steep interest for years. I bought myself a pale pink dress for the big day. It wasn't expensive, I'd found it on clearance, but it was elegant and simple, perfect for the groom's mother. I splurged a little on shoes, a small reward after weeks of skipping breakfast. I pictured myself in the photos beside my son, proud and happy for raising him on my own to that moment. But the official invitation never came. I thought it odd, but assumed with all the chaos of planning that detail might have slipped through. Or maybe, as the groom's mother, I didn't need a formal invitation. 3 weeks before the supposed date, I called Mark to confirm. "Mom, I'm glad you called," he said. For a second, I heard the boy he once was, the child who used to run into my arms after falling off his bike. "We need to talk about the wedding." A chill ran through me. Something was off in his voice. "Of course, son. Is everything all right?" There was a pause. I heard Fernanda whispering in the background. Then Mark spoke in a tone that didn't sound like his own. "Actually, we're thinking of postponing it. Things are complicated, you understand." Relief washed over me. Postponing wasn't canceling. Maybe they'd realized they were overspending and needed to be more responsible. "Of course, honey, do what feels right. Don't worry about me." 3 days later, while scrolling through social media before bed, a habit I'd developed to feel closer to my son, I saw something that froze my blood. It was Mark and Fernanda, glowing in wedding attire, surrounded by smiling guests. The caption read, "The best day of our lives. Thanks to everyone who made this moment so special." The photo had been posted that very day. They hadn't postponed anything. They just hadn't invited me. I stayed up all night clutching my phone, unable to dial his number. What could I even say? How could a mother ask her son why she wasn't invited to the wedding she had nearly paid for? The next morning, still unanswered, I decided to go to their apartment. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe an invitation had been lost. Maybe there was a second reception planned for close family. I rang the bell, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it through the door. Fernanda opened, wearing the silk robe I had bought her for Christmas. Her face showed surprise and something else. Irritation. "Carol, what a surprise, Mark's not here," he went, "out on work errands." "I saw the wedding photos, posted yesterday," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Fernanda opened the door a little wider, but not enough to invite me in. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, that was just something very intimate. We only wanted the people who are really close." Those words slapped me in the face. Really close. After 4 years of supporting them, after draining my savings for the dress, the rings, the banquet. I wasn't considered close. I understand, I said, though I didn't. And when exactly did you decide to have this intimate wedding? She glanced at her watch, another gift from me, with thinly veiled impatience. It was a last-minute decision. We didn't want to trouble anyone with the preparations. You know how it is. At that moment, Mark appeared behind her in the hallway. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I saw my son look away, unable to hold my gaze. "Mom," he said, stepping toward the door, "we weren't expecting you today." "Clearly," I replied, just like I wasn't expecting to see wedding photos online without ever being invited. An uncomfortable silence settled. Fernanda looked at Mark, waiting for him to handle it. He cleared his throat nervously. "It was something very simple, Mom. Just the best man, the bridesmaid, and a few close friends." Fernanda's parents couldn't even make it. They were away. Later, I learned that was a lie. Her parents were in the photos, smiling, proud exactly the way I should have been. I nodded, repeating, "I understand," though each of their words only deepened my confusion and pain. "Well, I came to wish you happiness. So, congratulations on the wedding." I turned to leave, but before I could take 2 steps, Fernanda called after me. When I turned back, her smile was no longer defensive but calculating. "Since you're here, Carol, there's something we wanted to talk to you about. We're having some trouble with rent this month. After all the wedding expenses, you understand. Could you help us one more time?" That was the moment something inside me snapped. A sudden, painful clarity washed over me, like a veil being ripped away. I wasn't a mother to them. I was an ATM with feelings. Walking home that day felt like drifting through a dream. The streets looked unfamiliar, faces of strangers blurred, my thoughts circling endlessly. In my head, I replayed every moment of the last 4 years, every transfer, every promise, every excuse. The pattern was so obvious now, I wondered how I had been blind for so long. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Mark once did his homework, where I counted coins during hard months, where I had written countless checks for emergencies that were never truly emergencies. In front of me, I spread out the bank statements I had carefully kept. The math was brutal in its simplicity. Over 4 years, I had transferred a total of $200,000 to Mark and Fernanda. Money from my pension, my lifetime savings, and the insurance my husband had left to guarantee me a dignified old age. That was more than I earned in 3 full years of retirement. With that money, they had bought a new car, furnished an apartment, taken weekend trips, dined in expensive restaurants, bought designer clothes, and finally held a wedding I wasn't invited to. Meanwhile, I had canceled my supplemental health insurance, postponed dental work, ignored the leaking kitchen roof, and sometimes ate only once a day to save. I remembered one particularly cold winter night when I realized I didn't have enough money to refill the gas tank for heating. I had just sent Mark $1,200 because his car needed urgent repairs. That night, I slept wearing 3 sweaters, curled under blankets, telling myself the sacrifice was worth it, that this was what mothers did. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. It was Mark. For a moment, I let myself believe he was calling to apologize, to explain it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that he had realized his mistake in excluding me from the most important day of his life. "Mom," he began, his voice strangely formal, "about you showing up today, we didn't get a chance to explain." "Explain what, Mark? Why your own mother wasn't invited to your wedding?" There was a pause, then he said, "It was a last-minute thing, very small and intimate. We knew you wouldn't approve of how we did it. No church, No formalities. A lie so obvious it felt insulting. The photos online showed a lavish ceremony with at least 50 guests, flowers everywhere, and an elegant banquet. Nothing about it was last minute. What about the money? I heard my own voice, firmer than I ever expected. The money you begged for a wedding that you claimed was postponed. The $4,000 I gave for the dress, for the rings, for the banquet. Mom, do you have any idea how expensive weddings are these days? We stretched our budget as far as we could. A tight budget. Those words were a cruel joke. They had spent more than I made in an entire year. And about the rent, Mark went on, as if this was a perfectly normal conversation, as if he hadn't just admitted he deliberately excluded me from his wedding. We're really struggling this month. I promise this will be the last time. That was the moment something shifted inside me. A heat spread through my chest. It wasn't just anger, it was freedom. As if invisible ropes that had bound me to a toxic cycle were suddenly cut loose. I stayed silent. Mom, say something. The surprise in his voice was almost laughable. I'm not sending you money anymore. I'm not paying your rent. I'm not financing your lives. Mom, you're not being rational. What you need is to learn to live on what you earn. I cut in. You need to understand that money doesn't grow on trees, and it doesn't flow endlessly from the bank account of an old woman. So, this is about you being mad you weren't invited to the wedding? The unfair accusation made me laugh, a bitter, sharp laugh that even startled me. No, Mark, this is about 4 years of being exploited, about you treating me like a bank and me like a stranger, about me finally realizing I deserve better. He tried to argue, tried to guilt me, tried to convince me I was being unreasonable. He used every old trick, but nothing landed. The spell was broken. When I hung up, my hands shook, not with fear or doubt, but with adrenaline, with the release of a weight I had carried too long. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Elena, a nurse colleague I'd lost touch with back when my life revolved solely around Mark and Fernanda's needs. Carol? Her voice carried genuine surprise. Oh my God, it's been ages. What's going on? And so, sitting at my old kitchen table under a leaking ceiling, I told Elena everything. I told her about 4 years of loans never repaid, about the wedding I wasn't invited to, about the bitter realization when Fernanda, who wouldn't even let me step inside her home, still had the gall to ask me for more money. Elena listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes gripping my hand. When I finished, she sighed. The saddest part, Carol, isn't the money. It's that your son has lost the chance to have a real relationship with his mother. He traded that away for things, for appearances, for a lifestyle he clearly can't sustain. In the days that followed, my phone rang constantly. Mark, Fernanda, even unknown numbers, probably their friends enlisted to convince me to change my mind. I let every call roll to voicemail. I needed time for myself, to gather my thoughts, to fortify my resolve against the manipulation I knew was coming. A week after the wedding, I decided it. I was time to act. My first stop was the bank. The manager, Mr. Johnson, had known me for years. He had personally processed countless transfers I'd made to Mark. Mrs. Carroll, it's so good to see you, he said with a warm smile. Here to make another transfer to your son? No, Mr. Johnson. Today I'm here to cancel every automatic transfer to his account, and I'd like advice on how to better protect my savings. Surprise flickered across his face, then he nodded. For 4 years, I had been the mother who faithfully sent money, sacrificing myself. This change must have startled him. Is something wrong, Mrs. Carroll? Some kind of problem? Let's just say I've finally woken up, I replied, my voice so calm it even surprised me. I'm learning how to take care of myself. He didn't press, just quickly canceled the standing orders, showed me how to block unauthorized access, and signed me up for safety alerts on my account. Walking out of the bank, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't only the financial burden that was gone, it was the psychological one, too. The fear of disappointing my son, the compulsion to sacrifice myself, all of it lifted. My next stop was the clinic. For months, I had postponed every appointment because the money always had to go to Mark and Fernanda's emergencies. Now I rescheduled everything: a bone density scan, a mammogram, blood work, and an appointment with the rheumatologist. When the doctor learned I had stopped taking my arthritis medication because I couldn't afford it, his brows furrowed. "Mrs. Carroll, this is serious. You were a nurse, you know better than to interrupt treatment like that." "I know, doctor, but sometimes we do irrational things when we think we're protecting our loved ones." He looked at me with compassion, then prescribed a newer, more effective medication. "This will help with the pain, but it can't replace the time you've lost. We'll need to monitor you closely." I left with a list of tests and a new treatment plan. For the first time in years, my health was a priority. It felt strange, almost forbidden. I had to keep reminding myself, caring for myself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That evening, Elena came over for dinner. She brought food, knowing my stove was broken, and a bottle of wine. We sat on my little balcony, the night breeze cooling the leftover heat of the day. "How do you feel?" Elena asked, pouring me a glass of red. "Strange," I admitted. "Like I feel guilty, relieved, sad, and free all at once. That's normal. You're grieving the relationship you thought you had, but that never truly existed. It's like losing someone twice." I swirled the dark red liquid in my glass, thinking, she was right. I hadn't just lost my son. I had lost the image I had created of him, the illusion I had carried for too long. "The hardest part," I said, "isn't the money. It's realizing that despite sacrificing my health and comfort, I never really mattered to them. I was just a tool." Elena squeezed my hand, her eyes full of empathy. "And that's why you have to cut them off, Carol. Not for the money, for your dignity, for your soul." That night, Elena and I had an unexpected visitor. The clock was nearing 10 p.m. when the doorbell rang. We looked at each other nervously. Who would come at this hour? Through the peephole, I saw Fernanda standing alone, looking unlike her usual confident self, almost fragile. For a second, I considered not answering, but then I thought maybe she had come to apologize. "Carol," she said as soon as I cracked the door, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry to come so late, but this is important." I didn't invite her in, just waited for her to continue. "It's about the rent. We're desperate. The landlord says he'll evict us if we don't pay by Friday. Mark's working overtime, but it's not enough. Not a word about the wedding. No apology for cutting me out. No acknowledgement of the pain they caused. Just another request for money dressed up as an emergency." "How much?" I asked coldly. $3,200, she answered, relief flickering because I hadn't shut the door. "I swear this will be the last time." "Times are hard, you know that," she added. I studied her, really studied her for the first time. A brand new coat with a designer tag still dangling from the sleeve, perfectly styled hair, freshly manicured nails. Not a trace of hardship, except the discomfort of having to scale back a lifestyle built on my pension. "Fernanda," I said, my voice strangely calm, "do you remember what you told me when I showed up at your place and discovered the wedding?" She hesitated, then stammered, I don't know what you mean." You said it was a ceremony only for people who were truly special. Remember? Her face went pale. Carol, it wasn't exactly like that. You misunderstood. No, I understood perfectly, and now I only help people who are truly special. And if I wasn't special enough to be invited to the wedding, then you're not special enough to get my money. Her fragile act vanished, replaced by cold anger. You can't do this. We're your family. Family? I repeated, a strange calm washing over me. Family doesn't exploit, doesn't manipulate, doesn't exclude. What you've done isn't family. You've acted like parasites. The look on her face as I closed the door is burned into my memory. Not sadness, not regret, but fury, as if I had broken some unspoken contract, as if my money was their rightful entitlement, not my gift. Oh my God, Elena whispered from the living room, having witnessed everything. She didn't even mention the wedding, didn't apologize, because in their minds, there's nothing to apologize for, I said, unexpectedly at peace. To them, I was never a person with feelings. I was a source of cash. That night, after Elena left, I sat on my bed and cried. Not for Fernanda, not even for the visit, but for the son I had lost. Not the physical death, but the death of love, of trust, of mutual respect I had so naively believed we shared. The following days, my phone never stopped ringing. Mark left message after message, sometimes pleading, sometimes accusing. Mom, you can't just cut us off. We have bills, responsibilities. You've always helped us. Why change now? Another said, it was all about the wedding. We meant to tell you, but everything happened so fast. And then the one that cut deepest. If you really cared, you wouldn't abandon us like this. What kind of mother does that to her son? I sat on the couch, winded, as if someone had punched me in the stomach. The question echoed in my mind. What kind of mother does that? And then another, sharper one rose up. What kind of son does what you've done to me? 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning as I made coffee, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw Mark, Fernanda, and an older man in a suit I didn't recognize. I opened the door just a crack, leaving the chain in place. Mom, Mark began, his voice unnervingly formal. This is Dr. Harris, a psychiatrist. He's here to talk to you about your condition. My condition? I repeated, stunned. The man stepped forward with a practiced smile. Mrs. Carol, your son and daughter-in-law are deeply worried about your recent changes. Impulsive behavior, suspicion, isolation. These are concerning signs that require professional care. In that instant, I understood. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to try to have me declared mentally incompetent, to seize control of my finances under the guise of protecting me. The shock gave way quickly to fury, then to a cold clarity. Dr. Harris, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am a retired nurse. I worked 30 years in the geriatric ward at St. Mary's Hospital. I know very well the signs of cognitive decline, and thankfully, I have none. What I do have is a survival instinct. Late, but necessary. The doctor faltered, then regained composure. Mrs. Carroll, denial is common. Perhaps we should step inside and talk more privately. That won't be necessary. If you are truly concerned about my mental health, schedule a proper appointment at your office with full documentation, not a surprise visit, escorted by people with a direct interest in declaring me unfit. Fernanda lost her patience and stepped forward. Carol, we don't have time for this. You're not well. Everyone can see it. You cut yourself off from your own family just because of some misunderstanding about a wedding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Fernanda. You deliberately excluded me from the wedding I helped pay for, and then came back asking for more as if nothing had happened. That's not paranoia, that's the truth. Mark jumped in, his tone a mix of irritation and forced concern. Mom, you're confused. We explained this already. It was just a small, intimate ceremony. With 50 guests, including Fernanda's parents. I cut him off. I saw the pictures, Mark. You lied. You shut me out, and you kept lying. And now you want to declare me incompetent just because I stopped giving you money. The doctor glanced at me, then at Mark, clearly reevaluating the situation. Mrs. Carroll, your son mentioned unusual financial behavior, that you used to help them regularly, but then suddenly stopped. Doctor, I said, locking eyes with him, over the past 4 years, I transferred more than $200,000 from my pension to my son and daughter-in-law. I have every record. During that time, I postponed medical care, lived in a house falling apart, even skimped on food just to help them. Recently, I discovered I had been excluded from the very wedding I helped fund. That was when I realized I was being exploited, and I decided to stop. That isn't erratic behavior. That's self-preservation. The doctor looked genuinely surprised. Clearly, the story he'd been told by Mark was very different from reality. You're twisting everything, Mark protested, but his voice had lost its confidence. I ignored him, still focused on the doctor. I suggest you vet your patients more carefully before showing up at someone's home with second-hand claims. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other things to do. I began closing the door, but Mark shoved his foot in the way. You can't just cut us off like this. We have bills, responsibilities, and now you'll handle them yourselves, the way I did when your father died and I raised you alone, I answered, pushing harder against the door. This isn't over, Fernanda snarled, her face twisted with fury. We have rights. You have responsibilities as a mother. A mother's responsibility, I said slowly, is to raise her child into adulthood. I've done that. Everything after was generosity, and you turned it into obligation. I shut the door, my body trembling but my resolve unshaken. Through the wood, I could still hear Fernanda shouting and Mark trying to calm her down. I leaned against the door, slid down to the floor, hugging my knees like a child. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. All I felt was a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the son I had lost forever. Relief because I had finally seen the truth. As painful as it was, that visit was a turning point. They had shown me just how far they were willing to go, even plotting to declare me incompetent just to regain control of my money. This was no longer about small lies or petty manipulation. This was something darker, calculated, and cruel. That Monday morning, I made 2 major decisions. First, I met with an elder law attorney, Mr. Miller. I laid out the entire story, gave him the bank statements, the transfer receipts, the messages asking for more money. Mrs. Carroll, Mr. Miller said after listening carefully, what you've experienced is a textbook case of financial abuse within a family. Sadly, it's far more common than people realize, especially with widowed mothers. You asked me how you can protect yourself? We'll compile thorough documentation of the transfers and their attempt to have you declared incompetent. At the same time, I'll petition the court for a temporary restraining order, prohibiting your son and daughter-in-law from coming near you or your apartment without prior consent. A restraining order against my own son. The words left me shaken. I had never imagined things would come to this. Mr. Miller looked at me with compassion. I know this is painful, but you need to understand what they tried to do. Attempting to strip you of competence to seize control of your money is serious abuse. You're not only protecting your finances, you're protecting yourself legally and emotionally. The second decision I made was perhaps the hardest, but also the most liberating. To sell the house, the place where I raised Mark, where my husband and I built a lifetime of memories, where I had lived my entire adult life. It was a bold decision, but necessary. First, the house was in terrible disrepair. The leaking roof, faulty plumbing, outdated wiring, all expensive fixes I had postponed for years just to send money to Mark and Fernanda. Second, it was far too big for one person, and the upkeep cost more than my pension could cover. And finally, most importantly, it was now filled only with painful memories, shadows of a family bond that no longer existed. I found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood near a park, the same park where I used to take Mark when he was little, a ground-floor unit with 2 bedrooms, a tiny balcony, and a property balcony. Shared garden. The price was reasonable, and with the money from selling the house, I could pay it off in full, set up a comfortable emergency fund, and even plan for travel, something I had never once allowed myself. When the for sale sign went up in the yard, I felt a sharp pang of loss, but also a strange sense of freedom, as if one chapter had closed, making space for a new one. News of the sale quickly reached Mark, as I knew it would. Small neighborhoods talk. The very next day he showed up at my door, his face flushed with anger. "Mom, you can't sell this house. It's part of our family. I grew up here. Dad lived here. How can you just throw it all away?" "Good morning, Mark," I said calmly, opening the door just a crack. "I can sell it because it's mine. Your name isn't on the deed. But one day it will be mine. You always said you'd leave me everything." And there it was, the bare truth, the expectation of inheritance that had been simmering all along. He wasn't worried about memories or my well-being. He was worried about losing what he thought he was entitled to. "This house needs repairs I can't afford. It's too big, too costly. I found a more suitable apartment." "Then let us move in," he suggested, as if it were a brilliant solution. "Fernanda and I will take care of the house, fix it up." "And where would I live?" I asked. He hesitated just long enough for me to see everything clearly. "You could stay in the back room or rent something smaller with the money you save." A wave of disgust rose inside me. My own son was suggesting I relegate myself to a back room in my own house, or worse, move out altogether so that he and Fernanda could live rent-free in the very property I had spent my life working for. "The house is already on the market, Mark. The decision is final." "You can't do this," he snapped. "This house is mine too. I have rights." "Rights?" I asked, evenly. "You didn't pay for it. You didn't maintain it. You didn't contribute. The only rights you have are the ones you've imagined." He looked at me as if he didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe he didn't. The mother he once knew, the one who caved easily, who cried, who felt guilty, was gone. In her place stood a Carol he had never faced before, firm, unyielding. "You'll regret this," he shouted, his face red with rage. "When you're old, alone, with no one to take care of you, you'll regret pushing us away." "Mark," I said steadily, even as my heart ached, "I've been alone for a long time. The only difference now is that it's by choice, not abandonment. And as for care, you've shown me time and again that you're only interested in what you can take from me, not in my well-being." He stormed off in anger, slamming the gate so hard it broke the hinge, one more repair, but no longer my problem. I watched him go, torn between sorrow and relief. Each confrontation cut deep, but each one also freed me. Every time I stood firm, I felt myself grow stronger. The house sold faster than I expected just 3 weeks after listing. The price was higher than I'd hoped thanks to its location, despite its condition. The buyers were a young couple with a little daughter just like my husband and me when we first bought it decades ago. There was something poetic about the cycle, something that softened the loss. On moving day, Elena and a few new friends came to help. The sun was bright, the air buzzing with fresh energy. As the movers carried boxes, I walked through the rooms one last time. In Mark's old bedroom, I found something I hadn't seen in years, his childhood teddy bear, forgotten in the back of a closet. I held it, memories flooding back of the sweet, grateful boy he once was. When had that child disappeared? When had he turned into the calculating, selfish man standing at my door demanding my house? Maybe I never know. Maybe the change was gradual, fueled by my blind sacrifices and Fernanda's influence. Or maybe that sweet child had only ever existed in the imagination of a mother desperate to see the best in her son. I placed the teddy bear in a donation box. There was no reason to cling to the memory of a son who no longer existed. It was time to move forward. As I closed the door for the last time and handed the keys to the realtor, I felt a surge of mixed emotions. Nostalgia for the warmth of the past, grief for the memories gone, but also relief for leaving behind a place steeped in manipulation and pain. Above all, I felt hope, something I hadn't felt in years. Hope for a new chapter. Hope for a simpler, truer life, surrounded by people who truly cared. Hope for a future where I was the main character in my own story, not a supporting role in Mark and Fernanda's. The new apartment was small but bright and cozy. The walls had just been painted a soft yellow, warm and fresh. The balcony overlooked the shared garden, where older men played chess on Sunday afternoons and children ran laughing under their parents' watchful eyes. It was a place full of life, brimming with possibility. In those first nights, I still cried, not out of regret for moving, but for the relationship I had lost with my son. No matter the exploitation, no matter the cruelty, he was still my boy, the baby I carried, nursed, taught to walk and to speak. Cutting that bond, though necessary for my survival, financially and emotionally, still felt like losing a piece of myself. But with each new morning came small discoveries, small joys. The bakery on the corner with the smell of warm bread, the group practicing Tai Chi in the park at sunrise, the library 2 blocks away with a senior book club. Slowly, I built a new routine, a new community, a new life. 6 months passed since I moved in. The seasons turned, leaves fell and grew again. And I too blossomed in ways I never thought possible. With the money from the house, I owned my apartment outright, had a safety fund, and enrolled in supplemental health insurance that covered all my arthritis treatments. For the first time in years, I wasn't in constant pain. My doctor told me I looked 10 years younger than the last time he'd seen me. "It's not just the medicine," he said. "It's that you've freed yourself from the stress. You were destroying yourself, keeping your son and daughter-in-law afloat." I also began doing the things I'd put off for decades. I signed up for a painting class at the community center, something I'd always wanted but never had the time or money to pursue. I discovered I had a natural gift for watercolors, especially landscapes. My teacher, Marcia, a retired artist, told me I had eyes that truly see. It was one of the greatest compliments I'd ever received. Elena and I became travel companions. Nothing extravagant, just weekend trips to nearby historic towns or quiet beaches. On one of those trips, We visited a fishing village, and I was enchanted by the simplicity, the rhythm of life, the deep connection to nature. I took dozens of photos and later painted a sunset over the boats, a painting now framed on my living room wall. I also learned to savor little luxuries I used to consider wasteful. A cup of freshly ground premium coffee, a good book bought instead of borrowed, a monthly therapeutic massage for my arthritis. None of it was excessive. I still lived within my budget. But these were small kindnesses to myself, reminders that my comfort and happiness mattered too. Mark tried to reach out a few times during those first months. His messages always followed the same pattern. They started with a few polite questions about my health or how I was adjusting to the new apartment, then quickly shifted to talk of financial struggles, and finally ended with a direct request for money. Each time I replied politely that I was doing fine, but I couldn't help financially. Eventually, the messages stopped altogether. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned they had moved into a smaller, cheaper apartment. For the first time since I'd known her, Fernanda held down a steady job as a receptionist at a clinic. Mark was working more overtime at his company. They had begun living within their means, as adults are supposed to. One beautiful Sunday morning, I was sitting on my balcony sipping coffee and watching the birds in the shared garden when the buzzer rang. The building guard called to say my son was downstairs, asking if he should be let up. My heart raced. 6 months had passed since the fight about selling the house, and I hadn't seen him since. Part of me feared it was just another manipulation, another plea for money. But deep inside, the part of me that would always be a mother wanted to believe maybe, just maybe, this time he was truly different. I hesitated, then said, "Let him up." I opened the door before Mark could knock. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, but there was something new in his gaze, a kind of maturity I had never seen before. "Mom," he said simply. I held the door open. "Come in." It was his first time in my new apartment. He looked around. "It's nice. Cozy. Thank you. I really like it here." Silence stretched between us. Too many wounds, too many words left unsaid. Finally, I broke it. "Coffee?" He nodded. In the kitchen, I made 2 cups in silence, my hands moving on autopilot while my mind raced. Why was he here? What did he want? Was I ready for another round of emotional games? When I returned to the living room, I found him staring at my watercolor painting of the sunset over fishing boats. "You painted this?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes. I started a few months ago. It's beautiful, Mom. I didn't know you had this talent." "Neither did I admitted. "I never had the time to try. Before." Another pause. He sipped his coffee as if summoning courage. Then, finally, he spoke. "Mom, I came to apologize. For the wedding, for lying, for everything." I stayed silent, listening. Too many times I had heard apologies that quickly turned into requests for money. "These last few months have been tough," he continued. "We had to move, cut expenses, work harder. Fernanda hates it, but I think we needed it. We needed to learn to live within our means." "Yes, you did," I answered, still cautious. "At first I blamed you. I thought you were being cruel, vindictive. But then I started doing the math, adding up all the money you gave us over the years. It shocked me. I had never stopped to total it all, and the worst part is I never once thanked you. I never acknowledged your sacrifice. I just took it for granted as if it were my right to receive your money, your help, your time." His words shook me, but years of manipulation had made me wary. What changed, Mark? Why the sudden clarity now? He sighed. "Fernanda is pregnant." And there it was, the real reason for his visit. I kept my voice steady. "Congratulations. When's the due date?" 7 months from now. And before you think otherwise, I didn't come to ask for money. I know that's what you're assuming, and I don't blame you. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? I pressed. Becoming a father made me reevaluate everything. I thought about how I treated you. I thought about how I'd want my own child to treat me. I don't want to raise a child who sees me only as a source of money. I want to raise someone who respects me, values me. And to do that, I need to become that kind of person myself, starting with respecting you. His words sounded more sincere than anything he'd said in years. Still, a cautious voice inside me reminded me of every broken promise. That all sounds nice, Mark, but words are easy. What matters are actions, consistency. I know, he nodded. I don't expect you to believe me right away. I just want you to know I'm trying to change, that I see how wrong I was. And if you'll allow it, I want to rebuild some kind of relationship not based on money or expectations, but on mutual respect. I looked at my son, and for the first time in years I saw a genuine vulnerability, not the calculated weakness he and Fernanda had used to manipulate me, but something deeper, truer. "It will take time," I said. "A lot has been broken. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight." "I know," he said. "I'm willing to wait, to prove it with actions, not just words. All I ask is for a chance." I glanced out the window at the garden where children played under the watchful eyes of their parents. In a few months, my grandchild would be among them. That child was innocent of its parents' mistakes, and maybe, just maybe, the prospect of fatherhood had awakened something better in Mark. "All right," I said finally, but with clear boundaries. "No money, no manipulation, just a relationship built on mutual respect. That's all I want," he said, a small smile of relief crossing his face. I didn't know if our relationship would ever fully heal. The wounds were too deep, the trust too shattered. But in that moment, I allowed myself a flicker of hope. The past 6 months had taught me much. I learned that love does not mean erasing yourself, that endless giving is not kindness but codependence, that dignity and self-respect are gifts you give yourself and no one else has the right to take them away. At 68 years old, I felt more alive, more present, more myself than I had in decades. My home was smaller, but my life was larger. My budget was tighter, but my possibilities were wider. My circle was smaller, but my connections were deeper, more real. I learned late, but not too late. The most important lesson of all: the person I owe loyalty, respect, and care to most is myself. And that lesson, however painful the journey to learn, was worth every tear, every sleepless night, every painful confrontation. I don't know what the future holds with Mark. I don't know if he's truly changed or if this is just another phase in our complicated relationship. But I do know this: no matter what, I will be all right. Because I have finally learned to love and care for myself with the same devotion and generosity I once reserved only for others. And that, more than anything, is the true rebirth I have experienced. Not a rebirth defined by material possessions or social status, but by reclaiming my dignity, my independence, and my intrinsic worth as a human being. In the months after Mark's visit, we kept a cautious relationship. Lunches every 2 weeks in public places. Conversations that started shallow but slowly deepened as trust was stitched back together piece by piece. Fernanda rarely joined, and when she did, she stayed distant, clearly uncomfortable with this new dynamic where money was no longer the center of gravity. The birth of my granddaughter, little Beatrice, brought an entirely new dimension. The first time I held her, I felt a wave of unconditional love I hadn't known since Mark was a baby. Her curious eyes, her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb, it was pure magic, pure innocence. Looking at her, I silently promised our bond would be different. She would never see me as an ATM, but as a grandmother present, loving, with healthy boundaries. "She looks like you," Mark said, watching us. "Do you think so?" I asked, surprised and moved. "Yeah, she has your determined eyes, even though she's so small." I smiled, realizing he might be right. And maybe that determination would help Beatrice carve a healthier path, building better relationships than the ones her parents had. One day, Elena asked if I regretted cutting off financial support to Mark and Fernanda, especially now, with a granddaughter in the picture. I didn't answer right away. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I said finally, "but also the most necessary. Not just for me, but for them too." "What do you mean?" Elena asked, genuinely curious. "If I had kept letting them exploit me, I wouldn't have been helping them at all. I would have been perpetuating a toxic cycle, a relationship based on transactions, not genuine affection. Sometimes real love means setting boundaries, even when it hurts." Elena nodded, understanding. "Do you think they've really changed?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "Mark is trying. I see real signs of effort, of self-reflection. Fernanda, well, she's more resistant. But the simple fact that they now live within their means, that they've taken responsibility for their financial choices, that alone is a significant change." Today, 68, as I look around my small apartment filled with the watercolors I've painted, the books I've read, the memories of trips I've taken, I feel overwhelming gratitude. Not for what I lost, the pain of betrayal and exploitation will never fully vanish, but for what I gained. Maybe what haunts me most is not the money or the years of being used, but realizing that sometimes the deepest wounds come from within the very family we thought was safe. But because of that, I finally understood. Love cannot exist without respect, and kindness only has meaning when paired with healthy boundaries. It took me years to learn that loving others does not mean forgetting yourself. On the contrary, only by caring for yourself can you offer love that is pure and lasting. Looking back, I no longer see myself as a victim of circumstance, but as a woman who found the courage to rise and rewrite her own story. And what about you? If you were in my shoes, would you keep enduring for the sake of family ties, or would you stop to protect yourself? We want to hear your thoughts. Share them below. And if you'd like to walk alongside me through the next story's journeys filled with tears, but also overflowing with hope, stay with me so we don't lose each other. Because I believe each story is not just for listening, but for all of us to draw lessons for our own lives.